Okay, welcome to the Light on the Path Meditative Inquiry. Uh, the intent here is to, read these quotes and reflect in silence and talk about it too, so that we can help each other understand it. And before we start, 2 minutes of silence here, and this is to kind of build an atmosphere where love and respect and mutual understanding is kind of the basis of what we're aiming for. And then at the end, we'll have 2 more minutes of silence to kind of package that up and send it out as an act of service to the world at large. All right, so 2 minutes of silence starting now. All right, thank you for that. And then we get to the text itself. We do a quick overview of the main lines that we've looked at so far, just to kind of give context of what we then look at later. So the first line of the text is, "These rules are written for all disciples, intended to them," kind of hinting at the idea that this book, as it's written, isn't something that someone created. They're depictions of laws inherent within the structure of the universe. The first one is, "Before the eyes can see, they must be incapable of tears." But kind of pointing at this intellectual effort to, we can only really understand the things around us if we rise above, the personal troubles that we find ourselves in and learn to see it from a different perspective. Essentially, if we're upset about something, we're not seeing it clearly, so that can be helpful. And we have one comment left on this rule: "Before the ears can hear, they must have lost their sensitiveness," which we'll go to now. And then Chris or Erica, I don't know if either you're willing to read this one. You don't have to. I'll read it if not. But,
I can read it.
okay, thanks.
All that is lovely in human nature, all the illumination and spirituality of man is represented in its perfect rhythm and melody. Sound is caused in the highest of the five fields of evolution, which are spoken of by the Sanskrit writers Akasha, the most spiritual form of the primordial substance. This condition is as nearly a state of pure spirit as anything within the phenomenal universe can be. It is beyond and above the ethereal world or Buddhic state. The sight and hearing of the disciples are powers drawn from that spiritual state and exercised in it.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a line later on in this book. It's a really small book, but later on it talks about the song of life. Um, and it kind of asks us to listen to the song of life and store that in our memory and learn from it harmony. Um, I wonder if the reason that music is harped on so much is because sound itself, like from this quote, comes from the highest substance of matter, that we know of. Yeah, I don't know if anyone else feels that they're moved most by music, like, intellectually or emotionally. And I wonder if that ties into this as well. Because you can see paintings and all these different kinds of art. But at least for me personally, it's normally music that, touches me the deepest. And I wonder if that's inherent, in the structure of reality, that sound is kind of this reflection of the highest form of matter that's here. And I'm sorry, I know that these quotes are pretty dense. There's a lot of words here, but it's these are all comments that came from the author of Light on the Path, and yeah, they're important to me at least.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about this line, sound is caused in the highest of the five fields of evolution. Um I don't know if that I don't know if like that personally doesn't really resonate with me. I hear you, Seth, that music has been the most moving to you. I'm not sure if that fits for me. Yeah, so I'm wondering how to interpret that line, sound is caused of the five fields of evolution. This maybe seems a little irrelevant or maybe a little like tangential or unrelated, but I'm curious, when you guys dream, is there often sound or how do you think sound is in dreams?
Well, first of all, I think that's a good point. That music doesn't speak to you like it does to me. I think that's natural. All of us are built differently, and I'm glad you pointed that out because it is kind of personal. So that's good. Um, and yeah, for me, I do hear sound in dreams. Normally, dreams are visual for me, but I do hear things as well. Um, yeah, the crux of a dream to me is normally the things that I see. Chris, I don't know about you.
Yeah, I also, well, because because I do record my dreams, most of the time the data that I'm able to record are things that I see. But there are times when I do have conversations in my dream, and sometimes I do hear things. I'm not sure if it's like always or just some dreams, but most of the time, most of my recollection, they're visual. But yeah, I do kind of think that there's also sound somewhere.
I guess I guess sometimes I associate like higher states of being with dreaming, um, potentially. I'm not sure if that's correct or not, but sometimes I do that. So that's why I was curious, how we experience sound in dreams.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm reminded of some theosophical classes I've taken in the past where they look at the structure of dreams, and I don't know, I agree that some dreams are kind of reflections of the soul, that it can see, um, independent of the personality, and then it tries to like funnel that information down, and it gets weird in the way because these vehicles are denser and they don't really reflect it too well. Yeah, that's the first thought that comes to mind. And then also sometimes that there are those dreams that are important, but sometimes dreams are just nonsense, I think. I don't know if you see that too, but like if you eat something weird, you'll have a weird dream. And that's
Yeah,
almost a direct cause and effect to the physical.
I agree. I tend to resonate a lot with I think Blavatsky wrote it out that there's like seven kinds of dreams, and one of them is just like indigestion. Um,
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of different kinds of dreams, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. If there's nothing else on this particular quote, we can go to the next kind of subset here. This one's short. I'll read it. Before the voice can speak in the presence of the master, it must have lost the power to move. And this is one of those three first unnumbered rules of light on the path. And the following slides are all going to be commentaries on this particular quote. But I guess for, a little while, we should sit with this and see what comes up, and then share that if you want. What would this mean to you? What implications would this bring in daily life? How practical is this? We're not practical. As soon as you feel ready to say anything, don't hesitate.
I think when I think about this line, I'm not sure how true this is, so I'd be interested to hear what you guys think, but I do think that potentially the further that we progress along the quote unquote path, the clearer we can see things around us with a higher state of mind. We can see people a little more clearly. As we sort of understand ourselves, we begin to understand other people better. And I actually think that sometimes our ability to wound significantly increases. We sort of have a greater power to wound because we can maybe, or at least we think we do. I don't know. This is just my experience. We can maybe think that we can see like the soft spots of people a lot easier, and we can sort of we potentially have the ability to wound. I'm thinking of like Jesus, the story of him when he's like in the market or something, and this woman is being belittled by a group of men, and he turns to them and he starts to like list off their sins. And he says something along the lines of like, who do you think you are that you're so much better than this woman when you have so many sins yourself? And he's like who, like he was the without sin be the first to cast the stone or something like that story that it's from, I think. um I'm not saying I'm anywhere at that level, but I think in general, like the further along you progress along the path, the better you can see people in a more clear light, and potentially you could harm them more. I don't know. That's what this line makes me think of.
Right.
Sorry, just to clarify, I don't think that's a good thing. I don't think it's a good thing to hurt people.
Yeah.
Or go ahead.
Oh, no, you can go ahead, Chris. I was just saying that was apparent from what you said. Yeah, we didn't think you were advocating for hurting people.
I think this line speaks about harmlessness. So the voice could be literally, meaning we hurt people with the words that we say. It could be intentional or unintentional, but it can also be the voice inside our head. So we're thinking about thoughts that are harmful or hurtful to other people. So harmlessness encompasses everything. So we have to be able to discipline our mind, our speech, and our actions before we will gain the experience of being part of becoming an accepted disciple to the masters. That's how this line speaks to me. Because when you become an accepted disciple of the master, you become an outpost of their consciousness into the world. Their power flows into you. So if your mind or your speech is still harmful, these words will have even more power, and they will cause even more harm than how an ordinary person would be able to harm using thoughts and speech. So for a person to become an accepted disciple, the quality of harmlessness has to be present both internally and externally in thoughts, words, and action.
I like that comment, Chris. Thank you.
Yeah, I do too. I
Thank
think
you.
both of you spoke really well to this. Chris, what you were just saying makes me think of this idea. One of the Masters of Wisdom evidently gave 10 rules that all human beings are meant to follow to be, I guess, helpful. It's things that we owe other people, that experience has proven that we just owe other people around us. First one being patience, non-anger, love of truth, spiritual knowledge, and the list goes on to things like that. Cleanliness, control of organs, non-stealing. And one of them is benevolent intellect, which kind of speaks to what you're saying, that even our thoughts, if they're in our own head, can hurt the people around us. Yeah, if benevolent intellect, which is just thinking in our own head, is something we owe the people around us, yeah, maybe that applies here. But thank you both. Anything else before we go to the next set of comments? All right, another short one. If anyone's willing to read it, excuse me.
To be able to speak is to have attained the power of helping others. The demand of the neophyte. Speech is the power of communication. The moment of entrance into active life is marked by its attainment.
So this first line, to be able to speak, is to obtain the power of helping others. That comes from the same book, Light on Path. I think it's kind of decoding for us with that, that quote we just read in parentheses at the bottom is trying to say. So before we can help other people in the presence of the master, we must have lost the ability to wound. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on what helping someone in the presence of the master would mean, as opposed to helping them not in the presence of the master.
To be able to speak is to have attained the power of helping others. So I guess on our level, we should be able to use our speech to help others. So in at the feet of the master, we're told that we should only speak if it's truthful, helpful, and it's really necessary. But looking at it from another perspective, speech has a certain occult or esoteric power, right? For example, in the Bible, God created the universe, well, at least symbolically through words. He said, "Let there be light," and there was light. So if I spoke to people, I probably have an impact depending on my relationship with them. But let's say if the Christ spoke to people, his words probably have more power than I could ever have. So I was thinking that it's also depending on the level of consciousness where the power of speech comes from. The words of the Christ will have more power compared to the words of a disciple, compared to the words of an ordinary person. And the ordinary person's speech doesn't have much power because we still have the ability to hurt people. But as we become more enlightened, when we become a disciple, we lessen our ability to harm. So our ability to have an occultly or esoterically powered speech becomes greater until we reach the stature of a master. And Our words, because they're no longer hurtful and they contain great esoteric power, they're able to help others just by mere words.
Very well said, Chris.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I'm reminded of this idea of sometimes people say they're helped just by being in the presence of a very spiritual person. Like if they go to some guru in India or something, they'll say that. Which I've never had that experience, but I have been in the presence of serious people, I think, on the spiritual path and through the Theosophical Society. People are really trying hard to live this life. I've been in their presence before and I can feel something, they'll be talking or doing whatever, but that's not necessarily the most helpful thing. To me, it's just, I don't know, kind of being in that atmosphere of the way they see things and look at it. And I'm also reminded of the masters themselves are evidently these highly evolved beings who now live in seclusion somewhere, and they're constantly helping the world, but we never see them, we never hear them actually speak. They're doing it in a way invisible to us. So it makes me wonder if this being able to speak encompasses more than uh, literal words, and if there's something else, and also this, if we are at our core spiritual beings that temporarily inhabit this physical body and this mental emotional body, that means we're coming down into this world where speech is a thing. But when we go back to where we came from, speech isn't like we know it here, it's something else. So yeah, those are thoughts that come to my mind when I read this first part. And the second part here, this comes from comments on Light on the Path. It's like a tiny little set of articles that came out in a book not long after it was published, or in a magazine. And it was titled The Demand of the Neophyte, as like the context of this commentary on speech. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about that. Why is speech the demand of the neophyte? Does that mean anything or not?
When I think about speech, I think about what the absence of it is, silence. I think that's equally as important because if speech is the entrance into an active life, if speech is only attained when we have the power of helping others, it seems like speech is something which is like we strive towards, like we work towards, like we don't necessarily have speech yet, especially in the esoteric sense. So in my mind, at least, like when we talk so much about the importance of speech and how it marks something, then previous to that point, I think we should maybe be engaged in a lot more silence and contemplation or listening. And I think about how this last New Year's, I spent a week at a Buddhist monastery and I did noble silence for a whole week. And I thought that was really, really rewarding and difficult at times. And it really helped me to decenter myself because I'm so used to using speech to try to present myself in a certain way, to try to center myself in my experiences and my thoughts and my opinions and my emotions. Um, and by being silent, it really helped me take a back seat and just observe and learn. And yeah, I just been thinking, actually, after that experience, I thought to myself, wow, I really want to do a lot more noble silence going forward. And I think, I don't know, when I read these things, sometimes I think that that's what we're called to do, is to almost sort of live in a noble silence sort of state of mind until some certain point where speech has almost like an esoteric power to us and is
That was well
entirely
said.
selfless. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
The only thoughts that come to my mind with this sentence is that I remember before reading a book on psychology, I think it's Carl Jung or somehow in his tradition, he mentions that the mind can only recognize something as real when we name it. So, for example, if a baby sees something, but he doesn't know what to call that thing, it doesn't seem real to it. So, it doesn't have to be a specific name. It could be like this person, this thing, this blue thing, but the mind has to label it, otherwise it can't be able to grasp it, and it won't be able to show that it won't be real to it. So I was thinking about this, that the moment of entrance into the active life is marked by its attainment. So the lower mind cannot really discern the lower planes without speech, because without the mind identifying it and putting labels on it, it doesn't seem real to it. I don't know if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and it makes me wonder if there's parallels to that on like the higher plane, and then the Buddhic plane. Like only when you can see these patterns in the higher plane, in the higher mental plane, do those patterns become real to you. And only if you can, feel unselfish love and these things from the Buddhic plane, does it then become real to you. That's really interesting. Thank you. If anyone's willing to read, I can read it too. The first two rules, which include the whole of that part of the effort, which necessitates the use of the surgeon's knife, I will enlarge upon further if I'm asked to do so. But the disciple is expected to deal with the snake, his lower self, unaided, to suppress his human passions and emotions by the force of his own will. He can only demand assistance of a master when this is accomplished, or at all events, partially so. So these first two rules it's talking about here are at the beginning of today. Before the eyes can see, they must be incapable of tears, and before the ear can hear, it must have lost its sensitiveness. And neither of those mention the master. So it makes sense that she's saying later on here that those you have to do completely by yourself. But sometimes I wonder why is reality set up this way, that we have to conquer this snake of the lower self by ourselves. Yeah, because it's when we try, I think it's one of the hardest things that we could ever do, because it's so sneaky and constantly transforming into something else. This lower mind selfishness is always trying to grasp more, even if we're trying to fight it consciously. See, I don't know if anyone else has ever thought, why is it we have to do this by ourselves? Why can't we be helped in this?
I think if we can do it by ourselves, then it's probably best for us in a broader sense, in a more universal sense, that we do it by ourselves, so that we have greater independence. And those who might help us, those who are more evolved, I don't really know what their reality is like, but I imagine they have some limited resources. I'm not really sure how to conceptualize that, but they can't do necessarily everything. So I imagine they can focus their efforts in other areas, if we can learn this by ourselves. And potentially also, we have to, in order to evolve ourselves, if somebody else does it for us, then we don't experience the growth and the evolution. It's like at some point your parents have, if they're trying to help you ride a bicycle, they can't be behind you the whole time. They have to let go and let you figure it out, even if it means that you crash. many times. If you don't learn it, then you'll never learn the skill if you don't do it by yourself and have a lot of failure. So, and I think we do get quite a bit of help, but it's oftentimes indirect, like reading these works, reading and studying theosophy, I think has been a great help to me. But it's not the same as like having a personal tutor or someone who like lays their hand on my head and I instantly become calm, but it is a kind of help, absolutely.
That makes sense. Those are good points. Your metaphor of the bicycle, it reminds me when I was a kid, I learned how to ride a bike with training wheels. So you had like two wheels on the back of it. And I just rode that around forever. And there's no chance you can fall off or flip it or anything. And then one day, I finally took them off, and I never actually had to learn how to ride a bike because I'd done it that long. I'd done it that way for so long that I could just ride the bike afterwards. And it makes me wonder if because there's this difference between the occult path and the path of the rest of the humanity. And it makes me wonder if for the rest of humanity, who are in this world now, everything feels pretty much how it's supposed to. To people in a spiritual path, it's probably jarring. It feels absurd and crazy. But to them, it correlates with their state of mind and their state of being. And I wonder if this world, as it slowly progresses within a minute, it's like doing this with those training wheels, until they get to a point where all of humanity is elevated to a point you take the wheels off and they just do it. They can operate as what we see as a master now can operate. Yeah. And while you're speaking, this idea can be that maybe this occult path, which is what Light on the Path is all about, doing this faster so that we can then help other people do it too. Maybe it's learning how to ride a bike without those training wheels. So there's risk of falling, really hurting yourself. But the reward is also you're doing it way, way faster than otherwise you could.
Yeah, I
I
think
am sorry. Go ahead, Erica.
no, I was just saying that makes sense. Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say that I agree with Erica 100% on the bicycle and that we have to learn things on our own. And I remember Jeffrey Hudson compares this like the logos is like the oak tree, and then the monad is the seed of that oak tree. So everything that's present within the oak tree is also present in the seed, but in its undeveloped potential. So the seed has to go down to to the soil, which represents the lower planes. It has to go to the deepest level, so that it can take root, and then it has to grow on its own. That's why, like what she mentioned, you have to learn to ride the bike on its own. But I was also going to add one more from another esoteric perspective, from the Bailey perspective. She says that the esoteric science is the science of redemption. And the monad, because it's pure, it went down because it's also trying to purify the vehicles. So remember that our physical body also has an innate consciousness within it. It has an elemental, not not elemental as in nature spirit, but an elemental consciousness of its own. Our emotional body has an elemental consciousness of its own, and our mind has an elemental consciousness of its own. Now, the soul, or in theosophical terms, the ego with a capital E, the Atma Buddhi Manas, the upper triangle, in that perspective, the triangle itself is a master in its own right. So it's kind of redundant if that master will seek the aid of another master, because the soul in its own plane is a master in its own right. And it's working within the lower planes to purify the bodies. And of course, we attract the kind of elemental that we have today, depending on our karma, which we have acquired in our previous life. But the reason why we have to purify them is because we're also trying to make them pure so that in a future epoch, because it's a very, very long time, they too will become monads in their own right. And it kind of reminds me of what Madame Blavatsky mentioned in Key to Theosophy. She says that Theosophists do not pray because when we pray, at least not in the petitionary way, like a Catholic would pray, please help me pass this exam, please help me find a good job. We don't pray that way. We act because we understand that the higher self, it it has a blueprint for our life, and we just have to align ourselves with that, and we have to act so that we can act in alignment with this divine plan. So we don't pray in a way that we petition others. So in the same way, I think we don't petition the masters to help us control the lower selves, and I don't think they will, because from their perspective, your soul is also a master. So, you know, it's something that you have to learn to be able to control your vehicles as a part of your journey, like what Erica mentioned.
Yeah, I really like what you said about how from the point of view your soul is also a master. Like we have to I think as far as I understand it, one of the greatest goals of like a teacher to allow you to experience unfolding your own teacher within. And if they that's not their goal, it's sort of it's almost disabling if that's not their goal, you know? Like we have such capability within us. We have such power within us, such wisdom within us. The teacher's goal is to somehow help us to access that and to grow into it. Um, yeah, not to be our, not to create a substitute for that, that is something so unique to each of us. Yeah.
That's well said. Uh, and I like that idea of the teacher, because that's kind of what the masters are to us, right? They're not they're not power tripping, or they don't get off on telling us what to do. Their whole goal in life, evidently, is to help us be like them, so that we then take their place and we help other people to climb too. Yeah, and it's a good metaphor of the teachers, because it's easy to see that in real life. When you have teachers, you can tell who's there because it's a job and who's there because they want to help you, you know, be as or just do whatever they're doing as well as they do it, so that you can do it yourself. Any takers for reading this one?
Uh, I can read, or does Erica want to read? I read the last one. If she
Sure.
wants to. Okay.
Okay. Otherwise, the gates and windows of his soul are blurred and binded and darkened, and no knowledge can come to him. I am not, in these papers, going to tell a man how to deal with his own soul. I am simply giving knowledge. That I am not writing even now, so that all who run may read, is owing to the fact that supernature prevents this by its own immutable laws.
So this first part here is saying that unless the snake of the lower self is dealt with, at least partially, the gates and windows of the soul are blurred, blinded, and darkened. Any ideas why that is? Why just the existence of that snake darkens the windows of the soul?
Maybe because the lower self is conditioned. So like my my mind, I have a particular viewpoint or a particular prejudice. So if I have a particular prejudice, let's say against a particular person, I think he's a very bad person. Everything he does, I'll interpret it in a negative way, even though he doesn't have that intention. So because of that, I'm not able to see the truth. I'm only able to see my own prejudice. Also, on an emotional level, if I have like an anger towards another person, everything he does will appear negative to me. But if I have an affinity for that person, everything that person does will seem to be nice for me. So I'm not able to see the truth. So unless I'm able to discipline the lower self, I won't be able to see the truth.
I agree with that. I think of it as a form of selfishness. If we are seeing people through the prism of our individual selves, our individual biases, our individual knowledges or ignorances, and not our higher, not a form of higher self, but a form of our lower self, which is marred by how much we do or don't know about people and events, and marred so much by our prejudices and our likes and our dislikes. So I think of that as like a form of selfishness. If we're, as long as we're marred by selfishness, um, I don't think that we can truly, evolve upwards. I think as we go upwards, and as our soul, I guess, becomes a larger and a more significant factor in our lives, I think we have to start to become more selfless. Um, like, just for example, I'm feeling a lot of like not like in this moment, but lately have been feeling a lot of like anger about certain people in my family who I think have like wronged me, they did something that just frustrates me, and so I feel a lot of anger towards them. But I think that is all selfishness. It's all me centering, own hurt feelings. If I was selfless, if I was thinking about it from a selfless point of view, I would see, these family members, cherished, beautiful, divine beings who are just doing their best, and who, may unintentionally harm others, or even maybe intentionally harm others at a time. But you see them as sparks of the divine. Um, you're not hung up on, oh, he or she hurt my feelings. Um, I don't know. So I think we do have to become more selfless in order to see more clearly.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good test. If someone is intentionally doing things to hurt other people and we can not get angry at it, I think that means we've done really well to to distance ourselves from that lower personality. Because yeah, I definitely struggle with that too. Yeah, it makes sense everything that you're saying. And it reminds me of the first two unnumbered rules. It seems like this first line of this here is talking about them. For the eyes can see, they must be incapable of tears. For the ear can hear, they must have lost in sensitiveness. Um, and once those things are done, then the dross of the lower self is kind of out of the way. And now something higher, the soul or whatever, can come down and illuminate it a bit.
Sorry, if we go back
Yeah,
to the last slide, I was wondering if you had
absolutely.
thoughts about that last sentence. Um,
I mean,
I
I'm
was
not
wondering,
writing even now so that all who run may read is owing to the fact that supernature prevents this by its own immutable laws. Yeah, so when I read these, before this begins, I'll write questions so that if it's really quiet, I have something to go to. My question for this particular one was, what are the laws in supernature that prevent intellectual knowledge alone from helping us understand our souls? Because I feel like that's what it's pointing at. like intellectual knowledge on the lower planes will not allow us to understand our souls, and that's inherent in reality. Um, yeah, my question would be, why do you think that is? What purpose does that serve? And I don't know if you had any other questions about it too, but
No, that makes sense. And that's sort of what I was thinking. I just wasn't sure if I was interpreting it right. So I appreciate hearing that interpretation from you as well.
yeah. Chris, did you have anything on that? No, we can go to the next
I
one.
was I was thinking because of the phrase, I am simply giving to the disciple knowledge. I am not writing so that all may read is owing to the fact that supernature prevents this by its own immutable laws. So I am reminded again by writing from DK. He says that all that we can really do is to become an influence of good. So the only thing we can do is to send out good thoughts to people and to be a good example to the world of how right human relationship should be. But we cannot force people to follow the spiritual path. So I'm thinking that's also what this line means, that whoever this writer is, I'm not sure if it's Mabel Collins, but she's saying that I'm just writing this so that anybody who finds an affinity with it will read it, but I am not interfering. I'm not telling you this is how it should be or this is not how it should be. I'm just sending these thoughts out to you, and your soul will be able to recognize them, but you will have to walk your path on your own. I cannot interfere because the soul has to take its own nature. It has to bloom on its own. Nobody can force it to bloom. It has to grow on its own. That's how that's how I interpret it.
Thank you. I remember hearing that evidently in the past, hypnotism worked different than it does now, even though it's still a thing. I remember when I was joining the Air Force, they had a questionnaire, and one of the questions was, "Have you ever been hypnotized?" And if you said yes, you couldn't do this particular job because they were worried you might do something crazy. But in the past, hypnotism seemed to work better than it does now. So I don't know if the laws of nature can change if needed by higher entities. Excuse me, as time goes on. But I'm reminded that I read a story where they would I think it was from a theosophical context too, hypnotize a lady, like a peasant who wasn't very well educated and was kind of coarse in her speech, just by nature of where she was and the environment she lived in. And they would hypnotize her and kind of pull that stuff away. And then she would talk like a different person, much more elegant and sophisticated. And then they'd go deeper and the same thing would happen. It's like another person inside that person. Yeah, I'm not sure what made that come to mind, but or if that's helpful.
I remembered when I was still a trainer. One of my trainees, one of the nurses I'm training, because she went out to eat for lunch break, and she says that she got hypnotized, and she gave her wallet to the man, and she remembered that she was still inside her body, but for some reason she could not control her hand. She just gave it to them. And at that time, there was like a syndicate here in the Philippines. I think I told Marika this story before. There's like a syndicate in the Philippines. So they would call you on the phone or somewhere and they would hypnotize you. And according to my training, the person who hypnotized her, they had like a mind link because she was thinking about something and the other person replied to her on her mind. They were having a conversation, but I kind of remember that in the writings of Madame Blavatsky, she doesn't advocate for hypnotism because kind of controls only the lower self, but it doesn't have any effect on the higher self. So it won't make you become, it can make you like if I hypnotize you, I can make you follow the correct etiquette. So you become polite and you can become presentable to people. But your soul inside is just going through the motions. You did not become altruistic just because of that. And I think she mentions in I forgot the book Science of Occultism. She mentions that this will create complications in the future life because in the subconscious mind, the suggestions will be implanted and it causes problems. When I was younger, I wasn't into theosophy yet. I was into, well, you know my background, at least most of you know my background. I was into psychism and stuff. And I remember that I also practiced trying to experiment with hypnotism, but only from books. And the first time I read it from Madame Blavatsky, I thought that she was overly cautious. I thought that no problems will ever occur. But when I was working in the US as a nurse, I remember that there were, like in California, right? There are people who are professional hypnotherapists. And then I heard in the radio that they do sometimes have problems because of the suggestions that are implanted within the mind. So my understanding is that theosophy wants us to develop through awareness and through understanding rather than just rather just reprogramming the automatic responses of the body instead of just having like, because it becomes a reflex instead of something which you consciously decide. I think I said a lot.
No, it's well said though, and interesting. Thank you. Yeah, I don't know. It looked at from kind of like a wide scale. I feel like Theosophy proposes not using brute force on anything except for like developing the capacity to unselfishly love. That's the only thing where willpower and brute force is necessary. Everything else is persuasion and yeah, just trying to see it from a deeper perspective. And hypnotism is not that. It's the brute force method. Yeah, if nothing else, I guess that person who could have their thoughts beam to their hypnotizer, it, if that was a materialistic person, at least it helps them see there's more than just the physical plane. But yeah, I don't see any more help than that. I see dangers in that. During this development, the disciple encounters harmony, pure knowledge, or pure truth in different degrees. And as he enters these degrees, he finds himself becoming part of what might be roughly described as a layer of human consciousness. He encounters his equals, men of his own selfless character, and with them, his association becomes permanent and indissoluble because founded on a vital likeness of nature. To them, he becomes pledged by such vows as need no utterance or framework in ordinary words. So when I first read this, the one thing that stuck out to me first is what would it be like to become a layer of human consciousness? If you've ever thought about that, I feel like that's kind of retreating from the physical world and going back to where we came from, which I think would be more real, which is why I like that idea. Yeah, if maybe in your imagination or real life, if you've ever, you know, felt like what that would be like, a layer of human consciousness. And then the second thing that stuck out to me was this association founded on vital likeness of nature. That could be really encouraging, I think, to people. That as you work in this way with the intention just to help people, you find friends along the way, and those friends, because you're working in the same direction and you have a similar nature, they're going to be there for the rest of your lifetimes because you're both going in the same direction, and that's that can be comforting.
Maybe it's also the law of attraction, right? So like attracts like. So I guess, and birds of a feather flock together. So I guess people of a selfless character, they tend to attract one another, like what you mentioned, because of their common purpose. And people of a selfish nature probably would attract each other in their own company as well because of their own character. But the first portion kind of reminds me of one of my insights during meditation, because remember the old theosophical saying that when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
That,
And
that actually comes from that comes from this book, Light on the Path. And not a lot of people know that. It's like a common thing, and it came from this book, which I think is cool. Sorry, go ahead.
So I was during my meditation, I was thinking that spiritual evolution happens, right? So at the beginning, we're stuck within our personality, but slowly we're rising up to the level of the upper triangle. And then slowly we're rising up to the monadic level. But the masters are at the level of the soul. So I'm thinking, because Madame Blavatsky, Alice Bailey, and the three teachers that I follow, and Helena Rorik, they tell us that the masters are actually here. It's just that we're not able to perceive them. In one instance, I believe Madame Blavatsky was asked if she could show them a master, and she says that the master was just in the room and he left, but nobody was able to recognize them because our consciousness is still too focused within the personality field. So I was thinking that as we develop, we encounter harmony, we encounter pure knowledge, we encounter pure truth. So we're ascending to the level of our higher self. Once we reach the level of the higher self, we enter the world of the masters. So they're also here with us, but we can't see them, we can't recognize them because their vibration is different from ours. But once we reach that level, our vibration becomes similar to theirs, and we were able to perceive them because of that. So I'm thinking that could be what this portion is mentioning. And I think I quoted before also in the Agni Yoga teachings, they mentioned that in the spiritual path, we follow our heart, and our heart will lead us to the hierarchy. And the hierarchy will lead us to infinity, or to God, or the supreme being. So the first portion is to find our heart, which represents, of course, our higher self, or our ability to love unconditionally. And that love will lead us to the masters, and the masters will provide us the teachings to be able to explore the higher truths, the higher mysteries.
Thank you. Yeah, very well said.
Thanks, Chris. I put in the chat this poem that was quoted. It's by Christina Rossetti, but it's quoted in the Manhattan by Moira by the request of KH. So it's connected to both of the Mahatmas that are most prominent in Theosophy. And to me, I really was reminded of it by what you guys were saying, because it speaks to how we're all on this journey of the evolution of our soul. It's a very difficult journey, but there's quite a lot of hope in this poem. There's quite a lot of comfort in this poem. It's saying that although there are challenges, you will find inns. You will find places of rest and places of help, places of community. And you will find those who have, quote unquote, who have gone before. People who are more learned than us, who have more experience than us, teachers who will guide us. You know, you can call them Mahatmas, you can call them saints, you can call them rishis, but who just knows more than us, who can help guide us. You know, you will not be turned away. I think this is a very beautiful poem that to me is something that I think about very often. That none of us are alone, and we will encounter much help.
Thank you. And that's a beautiful poem. something definitely worth being reminded about, because I think it's kind of inherent in the spiritual path that at certain points you have to feel alone. And I think it's the requirement of the soul doing it to itself. But yeah, remembering things like this poem, it's like a light at the end of the tunnel. And Chris, what you were saying about like the master being in the room, but you didn't even notice it. Uh, it makes me think of I think all of us at moments, maybe the sun is hitting us just right, or I don't know, when we were kids and everything just feels like in its right place for a moment. Sometimes I wonder if those feelings that we have are coming from like a master or something external to us, and we think it's coming from ourselves because we don't know anything else at the time, and we don't know enough to distinguish what's what. But yeah, sometimes I wonder if that's the kind of thing the masters are always putting out into the world, and at any moment we can tune into that, pick it up, use it to help.
I think that absolutely may be the case. I think I remember reading that a lot of what they do is very subtle, just like um, dropping ideas into people's minds, sending dreams that people find very meaningful. It could be a feeling, that washes over us. These things affect us so deeply, but they seem very subtle. It's not like a package arrives at your door or a letter falls from the ceiling. It can be much, much more subtle, but yet much more meaningful if it feels like it comes from within.
Yes, I
Yeah,
agree with that. Maybe that's also the esoteric meaning of the Christian concept. Remember, in Christianity, they have a concept like the communion of saints. Like in the Christian context, the saints are in heaven and they're praying for us. So I'm thinking that in an esoteric sense, maybe the Mahatmas, because they are the equivalent of the saints, right? Not the Christian, because it can also be political, but the perfected men, they're also praying for us in a sense that they're meditating in order to spread light within the mental plane.
Yes.
and it makes sense. And they would prefer it that way, right? Because they want to be anonymous. They're not in this for themselves.
Speaking of assistance from, more enlightened beings and whatnot, I want to send one more poem just in case people like it. It's a poem by a Sufi writer, Hafiz. I don't know if you guys are familiar with like Rumi or other Sufi poets, but I really like this one as well. It's what happens when your soul begins to awaken in this world to our deep need to love and serve the friend, which a lot of Sufi poets way of speaking to like the divine or all of humanity, all beings, a sort of higher source. Oh, the beloved will send you one of his wonderful wild companions like Hafiz. And I like this poem because I think, as I think I mentioned this earlier, I think that we all get help from um, these more enlightened beings indirectly by reading their works. Even like I feel like I have from Hafiz. I feel like he's a friend. I feel like, Blavatsky is a friend, although she's passed, long past. Reading her work definitely makes me feel a certain way, and it feels like she's speaking to my experiences. I mentioned to Seth that reading I.K. Taimi's work, I feel the same way, that he's like speaking directly to me, that these are like letters that I'm receiving in the mail, you know? Um, I feel very grateful that so many have written in a way that speaks, I think, directly to our soul, even going far back to like the Bhagavad Gita, thousands of years ago. People were to speak to us and trying to help us. So, yes, there are more subtle ways, like a feeling washes over us, or we have a dream, or a thought pops into our head. But also, there are direct ways, like reading works from people in the past that are trying to speak to us.
Yeah, it's a good point. Little breadcrumbs of people who've gone before us. Chris, did you have anything before we close?
Well, I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And then 2 minutes of silence, the intent being take everything we just talked about and yeah, bundle it up and send it out of service.
Thank you both. Today was lovely.